The Marketing Lawcast, the podcast for estate planning and elder law attorneys.
Your Google rankings still look fine. Your website still looks fine. Every dashboard that shows you performance metrics says everything is working. The problem is your phone is ringing less. So maybe you blame the marketing or the leads, or it's just a slow season, and you start working to fix the same things that you've always fixed. That may be the most expensive mistake you can make right now, because the market didn't just slow down. It changed fundamentally. And if you're still running your law firm by the old playbooks, you're probably solving the wrong problem. This is the estate planning reset. I'm Jennifer Goddard. For more than 30 years, I've helped estate planning and elder law firms grow, and I've seen plenty of trends come and go. This is different. At Integrity Marketing Solutions, we work with firms across the country, and we audit every prospective client before we take them on. That gives us a view most individual law firm owners never get. Not just one firm's numbers, but patterns across the market. And the pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. The firms struggling right now are not all making the same mistake, but many of them are making the same misdiagnosis. They see fewer leads, weaker conversion, slower growth, or more operational strain, and they assume they know which problem to fix. But too often, they really don't. We documented what we're seeing in a new industry report called the Estate Planning Reset. I'll tell you where to get it at the end. But today, I want to give you the central idea behind it, because it may determine whether you spend the next year fixing the right problem or the wrong one. For most of the last decade, the ground rules of estate planning marketing were reasonably settled. Be visible, and prospective clients could find you. Be helpful, and they would start to trust you. Build strong professional relationships, and referrals would keep your calendar full. That never made running a law firm exactly easy, but it did make it predictable. You improved your rankings on Google, and website traffic would go up. You publish useful content on your website, and people would come to read it. You invested in referral relationships, and advisors would send you clients. You generated inquiries, your staff followed up, and some reliable percentage of those inquiries turn into appointments. When one of those numbers slipped, you generally knew where to look. Well, that's the part that isn't true anymore. I want to be careful here because the fundamentals haven't stopped mattering. Visibility still matters. Trust still matters. Follow-up, the consultation, efficient operations, all of those still matter. Everything that mattered before still matters. It just matters more now because the environment around those fundamentals has changed. Weaknesses get exposed faster, mistakes cost more, and the symptoms no longer point neatly back to the source of the problem. A decline in website traffic may not mean that your SEO has failed. Poor conversion may not mean that the leads are bad. Weak intake numbers may not mean that your team needs another sales script. Operational strain may not mean that you need to document more processes. That's where the confident misdiagnosis begins. You recognize a familiar symptom, you prescribe the familiar solution, and you spend real money and real time fixing it. And 6 months later, nothing meaningful has changed. You keep playing by the old rules, the old playbook, and it could cost your firm another year. Let me show you what that looks like, starting with how clients find you. One of the most significant changes is happening before anyone reaches your website at all. Research shows that 78% of the legal search queries studied now trigger a Google AI overview, the highest percentage of any high-stakes category examined. And when one of those AI summaries appears, only about 8% of users will click through to a traditional search result. Think about what that means for the way we've all been working. For years, law firms invested in answering the common questions online. What is a revocable trust? Do I need a will? How does probate work? What's the difference between a will and a trust? Those articles brought people to your website. And once someone was there, they might read another page, learn about the attorney, register for a webinar, or pick up the phone. Now, Google takes information from several sources, synthesizes an answer, and hands it to the searcher without requiring a visit to any website. The question still gets answered, but the website visit disappears. We saw exactly what that does in an audit of a firm that had historically performed very well online. In the first half of 2025, they were getting more than 10,000 visits to their website a month. By the second half of the year, that number was down to roughly 2,000. An 80% collapse, and the phones were getting quieter right along with it. The owner concluded that the firm's SEO had failed, and honestly, most owners would land in the same place. Traffic fell, so rankings must have fallen, so the SEO needs to be fixed. Problem is, the rankings were still strong. The firm hadn't disappeared from Google. The site had not been penalized, and the marketing company hadn't stopped doing their job. What had disappeared was informational traffic. The people who used to click through for answers that Google now provides directly on the results page. That traffic didn't move somewhere else. It ceased to exist. And this is where the diagnosis got more complicated, because that was only the first half of what we found. The firm website still had visitors. People were still arriving through searches that showed a real intent to hire an attorney, but most of them weren't converting. And when we looked at the firm's most important practice area and service pages, the pages that are supposed to help someone decide whether to call, there was almost nothing there to help them decide. Very little about what it's actually like to work with the firm. Very little that set these attorneys apart from anybody else. Very little that spoke to the questions and fears of a person about to make an expensive, deeply personal decision. Almost nothing that gave a visitor a reason to choose this firm over the 5 other firms open in their browser tab. For years, their website blog posts had quietly been doing that work. People arrived through an article. They spent time reading and got comfortable with the firm's voice, and some of them eventually made contact. When the informational traffic went away, the weakness in those money pages was suddenly exposed. So, was this an SEO problem? Partly. That firm absolutely needed to adapt its search strategy for an environment full of AI answers and zero-click results. But publishing more articles or switching SEO vendors wouldn't have solved the whole thing, because the firm also had a conversion problem. The people who did arrive were landing on pages that gave them no particular reason to act. Losing the traffic revealed a weakness somewhere else entirely. That's why a decline in website traffic is no longer by itself evidence of an SEO problem. You can't look at one number and confidently prescribe a solution. You have to understand how people are finding you, which kinds of visitors are disappearing, which ones remain, where they land, and what they see when they get there. And whether any of it gives them a reason to take the next step. Acquisition and conversion aren't separate conversations anymore. They're parts of the same system. And the same thing is happening after a prospect becomes a lead, because the person contacting your firm today may behave very differently from the person who contacted you 2, 3, 4 years ago. What we found in researching our report is that roughly 41% of Americans are now perfectly comfortable using AI to help create or update estate planning documents. And among millennials and Gen Z, that number rises to more than half. That doesn't mean all of those people are going to skip the attorney. What it does mean is that many of them will use AI before they contact an attorney. They'll ask questions, compare documents, look up terminology, and research various estate planning strategies. Sometimes what they find will be accurate. Sometimes it'll be incomplete. And sometimes, as you know, it will be flatly wrong. But they arrive in your office believing that they understand more than the prospective client who walked in, say, during 2020. So they're more skeptical. They ask sharper questions. They challenge assumptions. They may be comparing your recommendation not just against another attorney's, but against what ChatGPT already told them. And to an attorney running the same consultation the same way it was run just a few years ago, that person feels like a worse lead, less trusting, less deferential, harder to persuade. It may well be the same person in a different posture. The prospect changed before the lead ever arrived. Meanwhile, a lot of firms are still failing at the most basic parts of follow-up. A 2025 study from Hennessy Digital found that 26% of law firms never responded to an online lead at all, and among the firms that did respond, the median response time was 13 minutes. Now, 13 minutes doesn't sound terrible until you put it next to research published in the Harvard Business Review, which found a business is 21 times more likely to qualify a lead when it makes contact within 5 minutes instead of waiting for 30 minutes. And speed is only part of it. Someone has to call more than once. Someone has to send the text and the email, answer the questions, make it easy to book, and keep following up when the prospect doesn't respond right away. Most people who contact an estate planning firm are not sitting next to the phone waiting for you. They're at work, or they're with their children, or they're helping an aging parent, or they're managing an illness or a death, or the slow realization that they've put this off for too long. A single voicemail is not a follow-up system. Industry benchmarks suggest a typical law firm converts about 14% of its inquiries. Just 14%. But top performing firms convert 40 to 50%, often working with leads from many of the exact same sources. The difference is what happens after the inquiry arrives. We worked with a firm that had invested in webinar advertising. The campaigns were producing leads, but the owner was deeply disappointed in the revenue. And the conclusion seemed obvious. They just complained that the leads were bad. They weren't serious. They weren't qualified. They weren't ready. The firm needed better advertising, or maybe webinars just don't work. We met with the owner and we finally talked him into trying one more thing before abandoning the campaign. They outsourced the lead follow-up to a person whose primary job was to work those inquiries quickly and persistently. We didn't change the ads. We didn't change the audience targeting. The lead list did not change, but the calendar started to fill up. The leads had been fine the whole time. Nobody had been working them. That's one of the most expensive forms of misdiagnosis that I see because it creates a cycle. The firm decides it needs more leads and spends more money generating them. The same weak follow-up process mishandles the new ones. The firm concludes those leads are bad too and changes vendors, changes campaigns, or maybe gives up on marketing entirely, when the acquisition system may have been working the whole time and the failure happened after the lead arrived. You have a conversion problem wearing a lead problem's clothes. Sometimes even that diagnosis doesn't go deep enough because what looks like a conversion problem can turn out to be an operations problem. We saw this at a firm whose owner was a genuinely strong closer. When prospective clients reached him, he connected with them, explained the value of the work, and helped them make a good decision. The trouble was that too few prospects were actually reaching him. The firm looked at its intake and booking numbers and assumed that the team needed better sales training, which was a perfectly reasonable conclusion. So they enrolled in training, worked on their language, reviewed the scripts, and everybody tried. And the numbers moved a little, but not enough. The real discovery came when we stopped looking at the numbers and watched the actual workflow. The person responsible for making these calls was intelligent, conscientious, and capable, and deeply uncomfortable in that role. She just didn't enjoy starting those conversations. She hesitated. She avoided pushing for the appointment. She was doing work that didn't fit her natural strengths, and no amount of script refinement was going to turn that into a consistently effective intake process. The firm moved her into a role that suited her better, put the right person in the intake seat, and the booking and the closing ratios climbed exponentially. The fix wasn't a better script. It was the right person doing the work. And notice what that story actually is. The visible number was the booking rate. The prescription was sales training. The underlying issue was staffing and role alignment. And that's an operations problem that surfaced as a conversion symptom. Operational weakness can stay hidden for years because the owner quietly compensates for it. The owner remembers what needs to happen, handles the difficult calls, resolves the client problem, checks the work, brings in the business, and knows how every unusual matter should be handled. And as long as that owner is present and running at full capacity, the firm appears to work. But research from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that businesses are 26% more likely to shut down within a single year after losing a founder, with the elevated risk continuing for years afterward. If your practice can't function when you're not available, you don't really own a business yet. You actually just own a very complicated job. And I'm not saying that from a pedestal. When I came back to IMS after my own health crisis and a year-long absence, I could see that we needed stronger systems. Processes lived in people's heads. Too much depended on institutional memory, and the work wasn't consistently documented. So I did what most owners would do. I announced that we were going to document everything, build the system, write the procedures, capture every process, and make the company less dependent on any one person. It sounded exactly right. The problem was that some of what we were documenting was already outdated. The market had changed while I was gone, and so had the company and our services and the technology and what clients were expecting. We were about to take the processes that no longer produced the right result, write them down beautifully, and make them harder to change. We made the same mistake that we're now telling you to avoid. Systematizing the wrong process doesn't fix it. It institutionalizes it. And that brings me to the central point of this episode. Acquisition, conversion, and operations are not three separate departments that you can diagnose one at a time. They're one connected growth system. And a weakness in one area usually shows up as a symptom somewhere else. Let me make that plain. Leads don't close, so the firm blames the marketing, switches vendors, or buys more leads, when the real leak is in intake. Or the intake numbers are poor, so the firm buys sales training, when the person in the intake seat is simply wrong for the role. Or the firm feels chaotic, so the owner launches a huge systematizing effort while the website is quietly going invisible to the way that prospective clients now search. Every one of those reflexes made sense under the old rules. That's exactly what makes the confident misdiagnosis so dangerous. These aren't foolish people making irrational decisions. They're smart owners applying lessons that used to work. And when the first fix fails, the firm starts to whipsaw. The owner invests heavily in operations. Revenue keeps grinding down. Everyone panics. The operational work gets abandoned, and the firm lunges toward marketing. The new marketing produces leads that a broken intake can't close, or volume a broken operation can't handle. And that feels like proof the marketing was wrong too. So the firm changes direction again. More ads, a new CRM, another training program, a new website, a new employee, a new consultant, a new set of dashboards, a new initiative announced on Monday morning and quietly abandoned 6 weeks later. The people inside those firms are not lazy. They're exhausted. They've been working hard on one urgent fix after another without ever identifying the constraint that's actually controlling the result. Effort is not the missing ingredient. It's diagnosis. The sequence we recommend is straightforward. Audit, upgrade, staff, systematize. Start by auditing the whole growth system. Don't open by asking whether you need better marketing or better sales or better operations. Ask where the system is actually breaking. How are prospective clients finding you? What happens when they encounter the firm online, and which pages are attracting them versus losing them? What happens in the first 5 minutes after an inquiry? And what happens over the next 5 days? Who's responsible for that? And are they suited for that role? What percentage of inquiries booked and what percentage of appointments hire? Can the firm deliver the work efficiently once the client says yes? And where are you still the only person who knows what to do? That's the audit. Then upgrade the process itself, because adding people, automation, or documentation to something that no longer works just gives you more of what's not working. Make sure the process reflects the market you're actually operating in. Then staff it. The right people in the right roles with clear ownership. And only then systematize. Document what works. Automate what works. Train the team on what works. And then measure what works. Audit, upgrade, staff, systematize. Sequence is strategy. Now, there's something that's genuinely optimistic in this. I don't want it to get lost. This is not more work than most firm owners are already doing. In a lot of cases, it's less, because the whipsaw is exhausting precisely for the reason that it never fixes anything. It's constant motion without progress. A clear diagnosis lets you stop funding the wrong solution. It lets you stop blaming good employees for a broken process. Stop blaming marketing for a conversion failure. Stop blaming leads for weak follow-up, and stop documenting activities that should have been eliminated. It lets you put the firm's attention and money on the one constraint that's actually holding growth back. If you take one thing out of this episode, take this. We are all playing a new game now with new rules. Mistakes and weaknesses are revealed faster. They're harder to recover from, and they cost more. This reset is causing a great shakeout in estate planning and elder law, and I can see it happening right now. The firms getting shaken out are not necessarily the ones with the smallest budget or the oldest tactics. They're the ones fixing whatever problem is burning hottest this month, while the other issues quietly reignite around them. The field didn't shrink, it moved. And that means it's wide open for the firms that are clear-headed enough to see where it went and disciplined enough to adapt. Everything I've talked about today is documented in the Estate Planning Reset, the 10 forces reshaping the market right now, and the research behind that, and what the firms pulling ahead are doing differently. You can read the full report for free at imsrocks.com. It's linked right from the homepage. Before you decide what to fix next, where to invest, or what your firm needs most over the next 6 months, read the report. Because the most expensive thing you can do right now is try to solve the wrong problem. That's a wrap on this episode of the Marketing Lawcast. And remember, great marketing doesn't just get you found. It helps the right clients know, trust, and choose you.